The wind pushes, and the steppe moves before it. Clouds sweep overhead, the short grass bends, and the only fixed points in the rolling landscape are a snow-capped mountain and the distant silhouette of Mren Cathedral. As you walk a lonely hour from the nearest village, and wind whirls dust through the whispering grass, details of the cathedral become visible: the conical tower, the lichen-spotted roof, empty windows. At last, clambering over the ruins that surround the church, you step inside. Light spills through a collapsed wall, illuminating a floor torn apart by treasure hunters. Faded figures of Christ and the prophets gaze down on the naked apse. Over one of the side doors is a sculpted panel. Although the stone is weathered, two figures are still visible, standing on either side of a crucifix. It's far from obvious now, but 14 centuries ago, when the church was new, few would have mistaken its meaning. This relief almost certainly commemorates March 21st, 630, the day the Roman Emperor Heraclius formally returned the true cross, the most sacred of all Christian relics, to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem. The restoration of the true cross put a symbolic close to a war that had lasted a generation and come very close to destroying the Roman Empire. Heraclius had won that war with a series of daring campaigns launched from the high steppes of Armenia, not far from the place where, just after the war's end, an Armenian prince built Mren Cathedral to celebrate his part in the victory. Mren Cathedral was built near the ancient world's most contested boundary, the frontier between the Roman and Persian empires. For 7 centuries, beginning with the great conquests of Pompey, the eastern edge of the Roman world ran from the Armenian plateau to the Arabian desert. The most hotly contested part of this frontier was always the center, where it bisected the fertile plains of northern Mesopotamia. But in times of war, any section of the 1,000-mile border might become the center of a major conflict. Many of the wars between the Persians and Romans devolved into sieges of the fortress cities guarding the Mesopotamian frontier. Otherwise, conflicts tended to consist of raids and counter-raids, back and forth, century after century, none really changing, or really expected to change, a balance of power that seemed settled in the natural order of things. Then, at the end of the 6th century, the balance was shattered forever. Before we begin the story of the cataclysmic final war between Rome and Persia, a word about this video's sponsor. Babbel is a language learning app that uses short interactive lessons based in real-world conversations. I've spent quite a bit of time in Turkey, and I used to be fairly conversant in Turkish. But since I've gotten more than a little rusty in the years since my last visit, I decided to use Babbel to refresh my conversational skills. Babbel offers a variety of Turkish courses tailored for different interests and needs. I decided to focus on the Turkish for Your Vacation course, where I reviewed such useful phrases as "Müzeye çıkma," is the museum open, and "Otobüs dolu," the bus is full. If you'd like to start speaking a new language in only 3 weeks, sign up for Babbel today. Click on the link in the description for 65% off your subscription. If you aren't completely satisfied, there's a 20-day money-back guarantee. Back to the Roman frontier. One September morning in the year 590, the Roman sentries at Circesium, a border fort in northern Mesopotamia, were startled to see a group of Persians in court dress galloping from the east. The riders drew up beneath the gates, and their leader, a man of about 20, called up in passable Greek, asking for an audience with the commanding officer. When the gates were opened, the young Persian revealed that he was Khosrow, the newly crowned king of Persia, and that he was fleeing a palace coup. The commander at Circesium sent the refugee king and his retainers to general headquarters at nearby Hierapolis. From there, Khosrow dispatched a delegation to Emperor Maurice, promising generous territorial concessions in exchange for Roman aid. Maurice agreed, and the following spring, Roman forces flooded into Persia, seizing the capital and decisively defeating the rebels. Khosrow was reinstalled as king. Then, in 602, Maurice was deposed in a mutiny. The usurper, Phocas, executed the emperor and his 6 sons, displaying their heads in Constantinople's main forum. There were rumors, however, that Theodosius, Maurice's oldest son and heir, had escaped by bribing the executioner. And, a few weeks later, a man claiming to be Theodosius appeared at the Persian court. Though almost certainly aware that the real Theodosius was dead, Khosrow launched a massive attack on the Roman frontier, ostensibly to restore the rightful emperor. In a series of grueling sieges, the Persians seized one after another of the Mesopotamian fortress cities, breaking through the inmost line of defenses just as the Romans plunged into a civil war. The Roman governor of Africa had raised the standard of rebellion against Phocas and sent a fleet under his son Heraclius to Constantinople. After gaining the allegiance of Egypt, Heraclius sailed to the capital and personally beheaded Phocas. He was crowned emperor shortly afterward. Taking advantage of the chaos at Constantinople, Khosrow occupied territory far inside the old frontier. Antioch fell, followed by Damascus. Heraclius, who had been trying to shore up the collapsing Danube frontier, marched to Syria at the head of the largest army he could scrape together. His ill-trained troops, however, were defeated, and he was forced to retreat. In 614, after a brief siege, the Persians took Jerusalem, burned most of the city's churches, and captured the True Cross. The loss of this relic, revered throughout the empire as the instrument of Christ's Passion, was a serious blow to Roman morale, especially after the cross was carried back to the Persian capital and installed in the private chapel of Khosrow's Christian wife, Shirin. As one Persian army began to conquer Egypt, another marched across Anatolia to the Asian suburbs of Constantinople. Desperate to end the war, Heraclius attempted to negotiate with Khosrow, promising dramatic territorial concessions if the Persian forces would withdraw. By this point, however, Khosrow had achieved too much to return to the old status quo. Syria, Palestine, and Egypt were annexed to the Persian Empire, and a Persian camp was established across the Bosporus from Constantinople. In the meantime, the Avars and Slavs swept over the Danube and occupied most of the Balkans and Greece. Little remained of the Roman Empire. Heraclius, however, continued to fight, melting down the gold and silver plate of Constantinople's churches to pay his soldiers. He reorganized Rome's last army, supplementing the usual heavy infantry with brigades of archers and light cavalry for fast-moving skirmishes. With this force, he began to attack the Persian armies in Anatolia and scored a series of minor victories. After outlasting a Persian counterattack on Constantinople, he made the bold decision to base his army in and around Armenia, where he could disrupt enemy troop movements and launch raids into the Persian heartland. This strategy proved remarkably successful. From bases in Armenia and the Caucasus, Heraclius attacked cities throughout northern Mesopotamia, forcing the Persians to withdraw troops from the conquered territories and engage with him. After Heraclius inflicted serious defeats on Persia's 2 best generals, Khosrow ordered a massive assault on Constantinople, knowing that the Roman Empire would collapse if the city was taken. Heraclius managed to crush one of the Persian armies marching on the capital. The other, however, eluded him and joined a colossal force of Avars and Slavs in a coordinated attack on the Roman capital. The Roman navy managed to keep the Persians on the Asian side of the Bosporus, sinking the fleet of dugout canoes that the Avars sent to bring their allies across. On the European side, 80,000 men hurled themselves against the fortifications, but the city's towering triple walls held, and every assault was repulsed. After 6 weeks, the Slavs and Avars retreated in disorder, and the Persians withdrew to their camp. Enraged, Khosrow ordered the execution of Sharbaraz, the Persian general responsible for coordinating the siege. Heraclius, however, managed to intercept the messenger and forwarded the death warrant to Sharbaraz with his compliments, suggesting that the Persian general might find it expedient to switch sides. Sharbaraz did so and withdrew his entire army to Syria. Having neutralized Khosrow's best general, Heraclius resumed his offensive, allying himself with the nomadic Khazars to ravage Persian territory. On a foggy morning in December 627, near the ruins of Nineveh, he encountered the largest remaining Persian army. The ensuing battle was savage. Supposedly, Heraclius killed the enemy general in single combat. But the Romans were victorious. The next day, Heraclius marched on the now undefended Persian capital. When Khosrow refused to negotiate a peace, he was deposed and executed by his nobles, who immediately began talks to end the war. The frontier was restored to its original place, all Persian troops were recalled home, and Heraclius began a triumphal march back to Constantinople. Along the way, he stopped in Armenia, where he spent a few weeks receiving the submission of local nobles. As he marched homeward, Heraclius passed within a few miles of the newly dug foundations of Mren Cathedral, which one of the greatest Armenian princes had just begun to construct. Although the design of the new church borrowed from both Persian and Roman architectural styles, its dome was likely inspired by Hagia Sophia. It was at that church, in September 629, that Heraclius celebrated his victory against the Persians, the true cross suspended on gilded chains over the high altar. The following year, during a tour of the territories recovered from the Persians, Heraclius restored the relic to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem. Back in Armenia, Heraclius's restoration of the true cross was chosen as the subject of the relief over the north door of Mren Cathedral. As a sign of his humility before God, the emperor was shown without crown or scepter. The warhorse standing a short distance from him, however, reminds the viewer of Heraclius's campaign to save the empire, concluded only a few years before. As the cathedral rose, the Roman Empire was at peace. But before construction was completed, and before Rome or Persia could rebuild their militaries, a new threat emerged. Fast-moving armies of Arab horsemen, unified and fired by the new religion of Islam, tore through the eastern frontier and swiftly conquered Syria, Palestine, and Egypt. By the time Mren Cathedral was completed, around 640, the world Heraclius had fought so hard to restore was vanishing. The Persian Empire would disintegrate within a decade, and although the Roman Empire would survive, it would emerge from the ordeal much smaller and profoundly changed. In this sense, the years in which Mren Cathedral was constructed mark the end of the antique world and the beginning of a new and very different era. Through the ensuing centuries, as Arab and Byzantine raiding parties passed back and forth to the south, a town grew up around Mren Cathedral. But then borders shifted, and trade routes moved, and the town sank back into the steppes. 600 years of abandonment have drawn the cathedral, brick by brick, down to the whispering grass. Birds call in the dome, and the sun shines through the collapsing walls as the wind pushes and the steppe moves before it. If you enjoyed this video, please consider supporting Told in Stone on Patreon. You might also enjoy my book, Naked Statues, Fat Gladiators, and War Elephants. Thanks for watching.